All right, today we're diving into a pretty wild theory about institutional corruption. It's called the Folklore Effect. And we're also going to look at the pretty provocative strategy designed to fight it, something called cognitive warfare. So the whole thing really kicks off with this kind of paradoxical question, right? Why would a system that's supposed to be about justice turn around and attack the very people who are trying to challenge it or point out its flaws? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense on the surface, but that question, that's really at the core of everything we're about to get into. And this isn't just a hypothetical. The theory we're looking at doesn't just ask that question, it actually offers up an answer. It's all about one man's radical idea and what he calls his social experiment to expose what he believes is the psychological engine driving all of this corruption. Okay, so to really get this, we've got to look at the whole conflict a little differently. This isn't just your standard legal fight. According to this theory, it's a war of the mind. And that brings us to this key idea, cognitive warfare. So what does that even mean? Well, it's the idea that this whole battle is really about understanding and then using these predictable psychological biases. We're talking about basic human nature, stuff that can make even powerful people in big institutions act in totally irrational and defensive ways. So if you're going to fight a war of the mind, you need the right weapons, right? A kind of psychological toolkit. The whole strategy hinges on understanding these core principles that make all of us, including powerful officials, tick in very predictable ways. And the foundation for all of this? It's something called prospect theory. Now, this is a big deal. It's a Nobel Prize-winning idea from Kahneman and Tversky, and it basically points out this really fundamental quirk in how we all make decisions. We don't really think in absolute numbers. Instead, almost everything we decide is based on the potential for a gain, or, more importantly, a loss. And right at the heart of prospect theory is this incredibly powerful concept, loss aversion. It's actually super simple when you break it down. The pain you feel from losing something is way, way more intense than the pleasure you get from gaining the exact same thing. It's not a 50-50 scale at all. It's completely lopsided. Yeah, I mean, look at this. The asymmetry is just stark. The pain of a loss is psychologically about twice as powerful as the joy of a gain. Think about that. And because of this deep, hardwired imbalance, we will do some pretty extraordinary and sometimes totally irrational things just to avoid taking a loss. Okay, so what does this have to do with judges or other powerful officials? Well, for them, the potential losses aren't just about money. We're talking about losing their reputation, their credibility, even just their ego. And as the source material points out, those are very substantial things. That fear, that powerful fear of losing face can become a really dangerous motivator when someone challenges them. Now, let's add another layer to this. Take that intense fear of loss and combine it with something called moral hazard. Moral hazard is basically when you're protected from the consequences of your own bad decisions. Think about judicial immunity, for example. It acts like a shield. So if an official knows they won't personally pay the price for a reckless choice, they're much more likely to take huge risks, especially if it means avoiding that reputational loss we were just talking about. So what happens when you mix those two powerful ingredients together? Intense loss aversion plus the safety net of moral hazard. Well, according to this theory, you get a predictable, almost automatic pattern of corrupt behavior. And that pattern has a name, the Folklore Effect. And this effect is described as a predictable four-step chain reaction. Here's how it goes. Step 1, an official makes a mistake or does something wrong. Step 2, that intense fear of loss kicks in. They're terrified of being exposed. So, step 3, to protect themselves, they create a completely twisted story about the person challenging them. They turn them into a monster. And that leads to the final crucial step. They have to suppress the truth by any means necessary. They have to discredit or silence that monster because if the real story ever gets out, their whole house of cards comes tumbling down. You know, this old Latin phrase really nails that final stage. The suppression of the truth is the suggestion of a lie. It's perfect. Because once that false story is out there, the system has to invest everything in burying the real facts. The only way to protect the lie is to make sure the truth never, ever sees the light of day. Okay, so if that's the problem, this predictable psychological trap, what on earth is the solution? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The strategy we're looking at isn't just about defending against this effect. It's about deliberately triggering it so you can expose it. And that's where we circle back to cognitive warfare. See, it's not a passive defense, it's an active, offensive strategy. The idea is to use this psychological roadmap to provoke the exact behavior you know is coming, predict every step of the folklore effect, and then you document everything, meticulously. And this quote from the source, it just cuts right to the chase. I create controversy because in doing so, I'm forcing their hand. It's all about being provocative on purpose. You create a stir, you force the institution to react, and you push them onto the defensive. Because that's when, according to the theory, they're most likely to make those predictable and often self-incriminating mistakes. So what's in this cognitive warfare toolkit? Well, it's a few different things. First, you've got obsessive, meticulous documentation of literally every interaction. Then you use hard, objective evidence, things like recordings and transcripts to blow up any false stories. You also use aggressive litigation, not just to win, but to push them in exactly the right ways. And finally, and this is a big one, you go around the usual channels with widespread public outreach. And we're not talking about a small blog here. The scale of this outreach is huge. We're talking about a carefully selected list of 10,000 people. Think prominent lawyers, senior government officials, a real strategic slice of the professional world. And they all get sent the documented evidence directly. The whole point is to make it impossible for the institution to keep a lid on things. Because at the end of the day, this is a war over the story. The whole goal is to change the public narrative. You want to shift it away from, oh, here's some disgruntled person complaining, to something much more powerful. Here are authorities caught red-handed undermining justice again and again. But look, this whole complicated strategy, it's not just about winning a single case or a single fight. The ambition here is way, way bigger than that. This is about trying to change the entire system. That's why each of these battles is treated like a social experiment. The prize isn't just winning in court. The real prize is generating a mountain of cold, hard, documented evidence. Evidence you can then use to make the case for real, fundamental reform. And what I find really fascinating is the philosophy behind it all. The stated goal isn't to tear down the courts or destroy the system. It's about their redemption. The whole idea is to force these institutions to actually live up to the principles of justice and fairness they're supposed to represent. So all this evidence gathered from the social experiment is meant to build a case for very specific, concrete changes. You can see it here. We're talking about everything from tougher accountability for misconduct to new legislation to independent oversight and even mandatory training for judges on the exact same cognitive biases we've been talking about this whole time. And all of this leaves us with one huge final question. Is it actually possible? Can a social experiment like this, one that's built entirely on a psychological theory, really create the kind of massive systemic change it's going for? Can you truly redeem a system by fighting a war of the mind? I mean, that's the ultimate test here, isn't it?